Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to PhillyCAM Voices. I am your host, Amanda Johnson. How does the City of Philadelphia handle sexual harassment complaints from its employees? City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt, the first woman ever to be elected to the position, just completed an audit of the city's policies and procedures, in part because of the Me Too movement. Reporter Ariel Taylor has more.
The Me Too movement is calling attention to sexual harassment and rape culture nationally. In a recent study by the Pew Research Center, 44% of Americans say they have received unwanted sexual advances, verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature. About 59% of women say they have experienced this, while 27% of men say the same. Philadelphia City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt released a performance audit back in July of 2018. It covers the city's sexual harassment misconduct policies and procedures. It shines a light on sexual harassment and misconduct occurring throughout our city government, and also raises questions as to whether the city has truly been doing enough to protect its employees and itself from financial liability. If you had no idea about this audit, don't worry, you're not alone. But we wanted to see if people even knew what the controller does.
Do you know what the city controller does?
No.
Do you know what the city controller does?
No, not a clue.
We sat down with the city controller to learn more about what she does and to find out more about the recent audit.
The controller's job is to make sure that tax dollars are spent efficiently and effectively, so that every dollar that people pay, that businesses pay in, is used to provide the best services possible. And that's my job for both all city functions as well as the school district.
Rebecca says that performance audits can have a pretty big impact on Philadelphians.
Millions of dollars can be identified, which could be put towards other uses, such as schools or roads. And that's where I think the city controller can have a big impact on people's lives, because I can find money that's being misspent, and then we can put it towards things that matter.
Rebecca says that the audit was created in part by the Me Too movement, but it was also fueled by local allegations of sexual harassment.
The outgoing or the then executive director, Vince Fenerty, was accused of multiple counts of sexual harassment and misconduct. He was forced out, but that was one example of this happening. There were claims of sexual misconduct at the sheriff's office against the sheriff. And then in December 2017, right before I took office, the city paid out $1.25 million for one case, and it was sexual assault of a police commander against a female subordinate in the police department. And that commander is still to this day on the job, even though the city paid out $1.25 million. And to me, I thought, wow, this is an area where it seems like something's not right. It seems like the city's not doing everything it can do to protect its employees, which is causing a financial burden. And if the city's paying out for repeat offenders, for example, and then not doing anything about it, that's creating a financial liability. In order to have workers feel protected, we need to have a centralization and then discipline schedule so that people feel safe and that discipline is fair to both the person coming forward with the complaint and also those being accused.
I'm here today to testify on Bill number 171109, which will place a charter change question on the May ballot to provide for mandatory annual training for all city employees regarding sexual harassment in the workplace. First, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Reynolds Brown for her leadership on this issue. For too long, sexual harassment in the workplace has been a taboo subject, a whispered warning.
Philadelphia City Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown helped to spearhead this change to the charter, and she provided a statement that says in part, I'm very pleased that citizens across Philadelphia recognize the importance of changing the city charter to mandate that all city officers and employees undergo sexual harassment training at least once every 3 years, especially in the light of the findings of the city controller Rebecca Reinhardt's audit. After the controller's audit was released, Mayor Jim Kenney accepted the findings with an executive order where he announced a new series of policies, such as expanding prohibited conduct, mandating training, as well as a new online complaint form to make it easier for city employees to report misconduct. We reached out to the mayor's office to find out when the new policies would be implemented and to get the status of the new reporting tool, but we were unable to get a statement.
But no, I'm hopeful that the recommendations will be implemented. They haven't been fully implemented at all at this point. There have been some changes made around the edges, but the recommendation for full centralization and for a discipline schedule, and hopefully those changes will be made in the coming months.
Rebecca says that if the changes aren't made, then she'll be right back out to talk about the issues again.
Because this is important, and now that we especially have an audit that shows that we're not protecting our workers, we need to fix it. And we owe it to the people that work for the city to make sure people feel safe.
Rebecca says that her office is working on a few other audits alongside her annual financial audit.
We have right now a performance audit going on behavioral health. So the city spends about $1 billion a year, over $1 billion a year, on behavioral health services, so mental health, addiction services, and it hasn't gotten a good look on if that money is being well spent in over 20 years. So that's an audit that's ongoing that'll be out in early 2019. And if people have ideas for audits or ideas, if they see any wrongdoing happening across the city, I also have an investigations unit in the controller's office that follows up on leads and makes sure that there's not fraud, waste, or abuse at the city.
This has been Ariel Taylor reporting for PhillyCAM Voices.
If you would like to know more information about the City Controller's Office and the audit Controller Reinhardt did, go to www.controller.phila.gov. This week marks the 4th annual U.S. Media Literacy Week. Media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, communicate, and create using all forms of communication. For our show tonight, we want to focus on conversation on the news media. With us in the studio, we have Jeffrey Bain, a professor in the Department of Media Studies and Production at Temple University, a former TV news producer and author of the award-winning From Cronkite to Colbert, The Evolutions of Broadcast News, and the edited collection News Parody and Political Satire Across the Globe. Welcome.
Thank you, Amanda. It's great to be here with you.
That is a lot of information that I know that you have for us, but we are going to give you as much information as we can. So talk to us about what does it mean to be literate in today's complex media culture?
Well, I'll tell you, complex is the right word. Things have been changing so much. We've been thinking about media literacy for a lot of years, but it's really only been in the last decade that everybody's walking around with smartphones, that everybody has a Facebook account. Now Facebook's already on its way out, so everybody's got an Instagram account or Snapchat or a WhatsApp, right? So there's so many ways, not just to get information, but to make information, to contribute. So I think we always think in terms of 3 overarching things. Like one is, how many sources do you use to get information? All right, so people who rely on just one, we call them dependent on just a single source. People who know to pick and choose from a lot of different sources are resourceful. So number one is to be resourceful, right? To be able to select from a lot of different places. So you hear different takes on the same bit of information and you can start to suss out what makes sense. Secondly is to think through who those sources really are. So a lot of people say, oh, I get my news from Facebook. But what does that really mean, to get your news from Facebook? Facebook doesn't make any news. Somebody else is putting it out there. So who are those people? What are those organizations that are creating the thing that you're seeing? And then a third thing really in this age of social media is what do you do with that news and information, right? Do you click that thumbs up? Do you hit the share button? Because you have to think carefully about the contribution you're making, not just what am I seeing and thinking about, but what am I contributing to all of this?
So what is your thoughts on the new form of media, like the Daily News Show, the Colbert Show, and the fake news, that is being put on the label of news today? Give us your thoughts on that.
Right. Well, fake news is a really complicated label in this day and age. A decade ago, we were calling The Daily Show with Jon Stewart fake news because it sort of looked like news and it actually was news, but it didn't look like news. He was doing it in a really different kind of way, and we said, what is this? It's fake news. Now, we have a lot of really fake news that's much more propaganda, manipulation, where people are really just making things up because it creates an emotional effect. It might make somebody like a person or a policy, or more importantly, dislike a person or a policy, to support a political cause, to vote one way or not another. So the line between fake and real has gotten very blurry.
Very, very blurry. Now, you gave us a couple with resourceful and things like that. What would be some feedback to give the consumers to what to look for, how they should look at the news and things like that?
Well, I think one rule is that if it's really emotional, right? If your reaction to it is to get really emotional, it makes you really angry or really upset, then probably it's been planted there for that reason. Right? I mean, we can have healthy debates about the things that are going on in our world, but if we're being triggered, and that's the right word, right? Because the data scientists, they're studying how can we really trigger you to share something on social media or to have a strong reaction to it. And the stronger we have an emotional reaction, the more likely we are to hit a thumbs up or to share it with somebody else. And that's the kind of currency that Facebook and social media deal in, is our engagement. So the more we're emotionally fired up, the more likely we are to engage. But at the same time, the more emotionally fired up we are, maybe the less accurate it's getting, right? Maybe we need to step back a little bit and think, really, what am I reading here? Where is this coming from? And why would somebody put this out there? Why is this showing up in my world?
So what is your thoughts about the whole advertising with the last election and finding out that Facebook may have known or may not have known about the false advertisement? Give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I think transparency is really the most important thing. And by transparency, I mean the people who are creating it or paying for it. You can find that out. So YouTube just very recently started putting a little label that you'll see under a video that will tell you who paid for this, because that is so important and so hard to figure out. Who funded this? Why is this there? The problem, there's always been advertising. There will always be people trying to make a good argument one way or another to convince you to support them or go against them or go against somebody else, right? But who's really behind it and what is their agenda? That's the tricky thing, and that's where Facebook got in a lot of trouble, right? Is that they allowed organizations, in some cases even countries, that they didn't know were doing it to plant information or misinformation, as the case may be.
That is great information. So now that we can look and see actually who purchased that information or who's presenting that information, because we didn't know before.
Yeah, well, YouTube has added that, telling you who pays for it. Facebook, not so much, right? So you got to do a little more digging. If you see something that just has too strong a reaction, you say, wow, I'm not totally certain. We talk a lot about being cynical. No, excuse me, being skeptical, not cynical. Skeptical is healthy doubt, having this sense. I was trained as a journalist, and we learned to be skeptical, to say, just because someone's saying it, does that really make it true? Maybe trying to triangulate, get it from various sources, try to understand who's providing that message and what their agenda might be. And then if you find out, yeah, this really holds up, I'm hearing this from different people, I'm hearing it from sources that I know I trust, then you can run with it.
Do you have people contacting you and say, hey, before I share this, is this real? Since you're in the media, do you get that at all?
It's tricky. Sometimes you'll see these quizzes, can you tell the real from the fake? And it's often very hard. None of us are immune, and the technology to make it look real is just getting better and better and better, right? I mean, so Photoshop can fake a photograph, and now talking about deep fake videos, you can make a video that makes it look like somebody saying something, right? So we have to go back to those old rules of really trying to figure out where it's coming from and who might be trying to do something with this. And there are organizations that are really doing good journalism and really trying to inform the public and give us the information we need to make choices in this world, and then there are others that are not. So unfortunately, it's gotten very difficult.
That it has. I totally agree. Now, can you give us some insight on how the perception of the role of media has shifted over the years?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting one, because we used to live in this world of great media institutions. So you had the New York Times newspaper, or you had Walter Cronkite, the anchor of the old CBS nightly network news. You know, you go back in time to, say, the early 1970s, would you believe 25% of the entire population of the United States was watching a half-hour nightly network newscast, all watching the same newscasts. Right. So we live in an age of decentralization, of fragmentation, where we're not all reading the one newspaper. We're not all watching the same television newscast. And because of that, we're losing a sense of who can we trust. Can we believe that newspaper? Can we believe that newscast? We're seeing information coming from so many different kinds of places. So really, when you hear the president blame the media, you know, what even is the media anymore? Here we are talking on a television, at a television studio, right? That's probably going out on the internet. So what media even are, and the media are plural. That's an important thing to think about. So we have so many media institutions working in so many different ways, and that's just fundamentally different from the world we used to live in.
Okay, so we're getting ready to wrap it up, but just could you give us information or some sites that we could look to kind of dig a little deeper if we find something that may not be quite right? Are there some locations we can actually go to say, okay, this place is a little more trustworthy, and we can look here, or just maybe just a tip, another tip before we go?
Oh, I think probably the best thing is to see, you know, you'll always see, so here's an example. A source of information showed up on Facebook during the election called End the Fed. That was the name of it, End the Fed. And it published a whole lot of anti-Hillary Clinton stuff that people got very excited about and shared, and told people, you know, you got to vote for Donald Trump, you can't like Hillary Clinton. End the Fed doesn't even exist anymore. It turns out End the Fed was only created to send out anti-Hillary Clinton stuff, and then as soon as the election was over, it disappeared. But on every video or every meme or whatever it put out, it would say End the Fed. So I say Google End the Fed. You know, instead of just saying, oh, I saw this thing that said this about Hillary Clinton, Google End the Fed and see, who are these people? I think that's probably the best advice I could give.
That is a very good tip. Be resourceful, find out, do your research, and thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We recently celebrated Free Speech Week across the country, and its annual event that happens the third week in October. It is proposed to have raised public awareness about the importance of free speech and a free press in our democracy. Reporter Adam Bernstein takes us closer.
Freedom of speech is guaranteed by the First Amendment to our Constitution, which was signed at Independence Hall. A lot has changed since then, and so have the ways in which we communicate, including social media and the internet.
With the accessibility to all media online and YouTube videos, it really creates diverse environment for people to just say whatever they want all the time, and it doesn't necessarily work 100% because not everyone's opinions are valid facts, and that is what I have to say about that.
I think there's a lot of trolls online that are probably just going on there, running their mouths, like trying to get people to react.
People are going to take that opportunity to say whatever dumb stuff they've had on their mind that other people don't let them say around them.
I think that, you know, any website that publicizes, that likes to express that they have free speech, it should be within reason, that that speech doesn't, you know, physically harm anyone else.
I think one of the challenges that we are facing in some of these areas is that the country is so polarized that more and more types of speech, right, more and more opinions are deemed to be, or some people are suggesting that they are illegitimate, right, and they should be suppressed. So we are seeing more of an effort to limit the types of speech that are acceptable in the public debate because we are so polarized, and also because of various social practices, including types of expression on social media, that create the conditions whereby people are expressing more and more extreme opinions, right? And so the pushback is becoming stronger.
I believe in free speech, 110%. I also believe in block, mute, and delete. And I think you have to give your users that option, especially online. If you're telling people they can say whatever they want to people, there are some people that are going to not say nice things. I mean, as a woman, the things that I have read said to other women, people saying that I hope you get raped, or racist things, or bullying, should that be tolerated? You know, if these people take their lives, then what?
In a free speech environment, there may come the question of, is everyone being heard, or do they find their voices simply suppressed?
I think that free speech has been suppressed because the current administration, when something's said negatively about them or about what they're doing, then they come and lash back and talk about fake news. And it definitely puts a hinder on what people want to say, and definitely makes it negative for someone to speak out against whatever is being said at the current moment.
When I think about the bystander effect, and I feel like a lot of people have things to say, but we're scared to say it. We don't, or we say things that will compromise, and I feel like that's what suppresses freedom of speech, is because people compromise.
Suppression is caused by fear, because people are allowed to do their freedom of speech here, but they choose not to because they're scared.
I'm going to say no, because I believe that people can theoretically say whatever they want. That doesn't mean they don't suffer consequences for what they say. If they say something that's, you know, particularly like bigoted or ignorant or really offensive to people, but legally speaking, yes, people can say whatever they want. They just need to understand that they suffer consequences for it sometimes if they do.
Some people are concerned about social trends that are calling for the suppression of speech or the limitations on speech that is biased or hate-based. Right?
The press is not always seen in a good light with our president, but Melanie Roy, president of Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, sees it differently.
When things like Me Too happen, or even the priest abuse scandal, I felt like the press was an ally and helped get those stories out, not a hindrance to the process.
Just what is free speech?
And so I believe that as a student, we have the opportunity to use this platform to speak out about many issues.
I think free speech allows me to express my opinions and express my beliefs and express my views, and for me in a way that's constructive, which is the most important part about it.
For PhillyCAM Voices, I'm Adam Bornstein.
A new art installation in Harrisburg is drawing attention to the treatment of immigrants seeking asylum in the United States. We have Michelle Angeli Ortiz here with us today, and she's going to talk to us about the different things that are going on. So Angela, first question, tell us about the timing of this work in Harrisburg, and how does this issue connect with the Pennsylvania's governor's race, which will be tomorrow, November 6th, which is Election Day.
Well, first, thanks for inviting me. The Familias Separadas project was created in 2013 to really bring awareness and amplify the existing voices of families that have been affected by detention and deportation, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania. We live in a state where we have a family prison called the Berks County Residential Center, which detains children as young as 9 weeks old, and currently still has about 30 families still detained in this detention center. There have been a list of human rights abuses that have been reported by the ACLU and the Human Rights Watch, and there is a coalition called the Shutdown Berks Coalition, which is my community partner for this second phase of work, of which they've been fighting to try to shut down the detention center. The artwork itself is highlighting 4 out of the 14 mothers that were detained at this detention center for close to 2 years with their children. Each one of the stories are highlighted through each one of the 8 installations that are placed in Harrisburg. Why in Harrisburg? This is the second phase of the work that that's under this project that I created. The first phase was held here in Philadelphia, where I did 5 different installations, including City Hall, Love Park, and in front of the Immigration's Customs Enforcement Building on 16th and Callowhill here in Philadelphia. The reason why I think it's crucial to push out these stories is because one, a lot of people don't even know that there's a family prison in our state. They are unaware that our governor has the power to issue an emergency release order and to shut down the center. They are unaware that this is a county-run family prison, which earns the county $1.3 million in federal funds in incarcerating families. So these are all facts that I feel that is really necessary, that I've learned through the coalition. But then I also feel that it's necessary, most importantly, to use the artwork and the videos that support the artwork to push out and put at the forefront the mothers, direct stories coming from the mothers about their experiences, the human rights abuses that have happened in this prison, and also to advocate for themselves and for the families that are inside to end family detention in our state.
Wow. How has the art installation drawn attention to the work of the shutdown of Burke's Coalition?
So the coalition has been fighting. The coalition is comprised of different organizations, organizers, lawyers, advocates, community members. And what I really have enjoyed in working with the coalition is that they are focused on always putting the messages and the stories of community members at the forefront. So I've been working within the past year and a half with the coalition in trying to find strategic ways to push out the stories of the mothers. I mentioned that there are 4 mothers that are highlighted in the artwork. 3 of them were released from the center and are still in the United States, but they're still fighting against their deportation. And 1 of the mothers was deported. And so through this project, I've been able to connect with the mothers, and the coalition has been able to utilize these stories to help advocate in the work that they're trying to do to contest the license of the center and also to put pressure on our current governor to shut down the prison.
We have a 1-minute video from one of the women held at Burke's who was deported back in El Salvador. Let's take a look. All right, so how can we get more information?
And more information about the project can be found on my website, which is michelleangela.com, and more information on how to get involved with lobby visits, making calls to the governor, the vigils at the Burke's Detention Center. You can contact the Shutdown Burke's Coalition.
All right, thank you so much for your time and your information.
Thank you.
So tomorrow, November 6th, is Election Day. Don't forget to get out and vote. The polls open at 7 a.m. That's all that we have for this episode on PhillyCAM Voices. Thank you and have a good time.